hopefully I have a chance to talk about that later. A has a couple comments here. Let's see. It's good that the Holocaust is well known in pop culture. When will there be movies or TV shows about the Gulag Archipelago, the Katyn Forest Massacre, Estonian Forest Brothers, the Ukrainian Holodomor, the Cultural Revolution, the Cambodian killing fields, and the nightmarish horrors of North Korea? Surely these stories would draw eyeballs. They would draw eyeballs. People would be fascinated and appalled and shocked by them. Those films will never be made because those murderers were all left-wingers. And the left-wingers make the movies. I think I would so much love to do a movie about these things. There is one out there, and I've mentioned it several times before. It's on YouTube in really quite low quality with subtitles, English subtitles. I want to say it's like a 360 resolution or something. But that's enough to get the point. It's called The Chekist, and it's about the first generation of Soviet secret policemen and all the murdering that goes on. And it is absolutely brutal. It is just nothing but people stripped naked, shot, dragged into trucks, and hauled off. And it takes a strong stomach to watch that movie. But more than anything, I think that movie had an effect on me because it really was just unbelievable. Matter of fact, I was just listening to the first part of the Cold War, which, as I said, opens tomorrow. And I cover the Chekists, and I cover Dzerzhinsky and what happened in the basement of the Lubyanka and all of that. And so much of that came from that movie. So, but nobody's going to make them. I saw some English woman politician. I was watching a lot of stuff on Brexit and Nigel Farage, and there's this woman liberal who said that Mao did a lot more good than harm, and the people next to her just went, "What?" But she really believes it. He killed 50 million people. 50 million. But he did more good than harm, because why? Why? What makes you say that? What makes you say Castro did some good for his people? He kept those people poor for 50, 60 years, and when he died, he had $800 million. Who's the chump here? Hi, Mama Maria. And take another one from A, and then maybe look around a little bit, and then I'm going to go, because obviously your boy's a little tired today. This is also from A on the members-only page. Was the Virginia gun rights rally a tactical victory but a strategic defeat for the gun rights community? I'll bet you the government scanned every face, collected every cell number, scraped every social media post, and created a monster database for future use against our side. I hate to be the person to break this to you, and I'm not trying to be flip here, but all of this information was had and has been had for a decade now. I've listened to lectures from people who are on the inside of Google, and I forget what the number is, but I think it's 3 million pages of data on every single citizen of the United States. And you could say that's not possible. 3 million pages of data, it is not possible. Well, it is possible, because they have recorded every click you've ever made on the internet. They've taken pictures of every website, every picture you've ever downloaded, all of it. They've got it all. And it wasn't until I listened to this that I realized, and I have to say, the person doing the demonstration didn't seem to get it. He was talking about all of the data mining they're doing, and maybe he did come to think. Anyway, the reason they're collecting all this data is not so they can come after us and take our guns. The reason they're collecting all this data is because they are convinced, and they may be right, that if you collect enough data on human actions, it doesn't matter what it is, you can then put together an AI, artificial intelligence, that will look at that data and find correlations that are not immediately obvious. Once again, this is in this speech I gave last weekend, and I'm going to put up tomorrow, but let me just tell you what I mean by this. If you've got a bunch of red, let's say you've got red bird, and you want to turn it into a blue bird, then the traditional way that you would do that is you would mate it with blue birds, and so your first bird is mostly red with a little purple and so on, and you continue to find the least red and most blue children you can find, and mate them with the most blue partners you can find, and over the course of many, many generations, you will eventually drift all of that genetic information over, and the gene that encodes for red birds will eventually get bred out of the system, although it'll still probably be there somewhere. Every now and then you get a red bird recessive. And over the course of a great deal of time, incrementally, generation by generation, the bird goes from bluer to slightly redder, red to slightly bluer, becomes slightly bluer over a great period of time. And that's the way things have been. But what Google's doing is they're trying to become mimetic engineers. So if you want to turn a red bird blue, you can breed it with blue birds over the course of many, many, many generations, or you can find out what gene encodes for red feathers and which gene encodes for blue feathers, and then you can cut that gene out of the red bird's DNA, insert the blue feather gene, and then you will have blue birds overnight, forever. And they will be pure blue. And it doesn't take any time at all. Instead of having to go and do this entire rigmarole, genetic engineers would allow you to go in and target a specific feature that they wanted to change, and instead of having to breed it out through this incredibly complex and not terribly effective or efficient process, with genetic engineering, you just go in and say, I don't want a blue bird. I want this bird to be blue. I turn off the red gene, I'll turn on the blue. Done. This is what they're trying to do with information. They're capturing every single mouse click, not because they plan to use it against you someday. This is what I've come to believe. But they're capturing it because every single mouse click is just yet another data point for how people behave. And they're convinced that if they collect enough data on enough people, they will be able to predict things, but more importantly, they will find out where those little switches are. So they would become mimetic engineers, not genetic engineers. I used an example before, and I've talked about this before, but just go over it one more time, and then I think I'm going to go home. But basically, to give you an idea of why I think they're doing all of this, I'm going to make an example that is as ridiculous as I can make it, because if I make it realistic, you won't see what's going on behind the curtain. So I'm just going to purposely make this stupid so it stands out. People have been asking me if I can fix the streaming, that we're streaming a lower level. I'm on Wi-Fi now, and my cable connection went out a couple weeks ago, and I have to get it fixed so I can get that done and be back to where we were before. So sorry about the low quality. Anyway, yes, Asimov talked about this in the Foundation trilogy, Psychohistory. He had the idea, this is in the 50s, I want to say, that if you could collect enough information that you couldn't predict individual behaviors, but if you could get enough information, you could predict the behaviors of large numbers of people. So here's what I think Google's trying to do. Let's say Google keeps track of every mouse click that's ever made. They keep track of every ad that's ever seen. They keep track of what movies you've seen. They know what you buy online through Amazon and so on. Let's say they've recorded all of this, and let's say that over the course of the years that they gather this, they put their AI on it, and they find, to their astonishment, for reasons that are unclear, that people who have just seen a horror movie are more likely to go out and buy a toaster the next day. Again, trying to make a ridiculous example, but stay with me on this. They can show that significant numbers of people who watch horror movies then go out and buy toasters more often than people who don't see horror movies. And then let's say that Google wants to have a society where fat people are gone because they don't like the way they look, and they're going to justify it as in their own health and so on. So instead of banning sugar and bread, what Google will do is they will suppress your ability to find horror movies. Because if you can't find a horror movie to go see, then you won't be as likely to buy a toaster. And if you don't buy the toaster, you won't be as likely to buy as much bread. And if you don't buy as much bread, you're not going to be as fat. And so in order to reduce obesity, they will suppress horror movies. Now, needless to say, that example is just made up out of thin air. But that's what they're looking for. They're looking for trends. If this, then that. So rather than having to go and change all of society by moving this entire thing like crossbreeding a bird, instead of having to move the whole thing, they can just go in and hit the one little thing or the small things. So they'll find these connections that are not obvious to anybody. And the more data they get, the more confident they will be and the more accurate their predictions will be. And as they analyze, no one's going to analyze it. Artificial intelligence is going to analyze it. It's beyond human comprehension. But they will begin to find patterns, and when they find, and what they're looking for are the choke points. They're looking for the bottlenecks. In other words, if all of this behavior is here, and then we want all of this behavior to be over here, looking at things historically through all this data we've captured, where is the narrowest point? At what point do all of these behaviors have to pass through? And then they're just going to go in there and change that. And that's it. And I know this is true because they put out a internal video which was leaked called The Selfish Ledger. It's based on the theory of the selfish gene by Richard Dawkins. And basically what they're saying is, and they say this out loud to their own people. This is a message they made for top management. This isn't for the rank and file Google people. Basically, they said that a person is their ledger. That the collection of choices that you make is in fact you, and survives your death. They're working. The ultimate goal, I'm utterly convinced, for these multi-billionaires is, and I know this sounds bizarre, but I just think everything points to it, makes sense, especially when you find out the research they're doing. I think they're trying to get as much data as they can so they can understand consciousness, so that they can encode their consciousness and upload it so that they will stay immortal. They want to live forever. That's what I believe. I really do. And when you run into artificial intelligence, you say, well, okay, well, maybe it's smarter than we are, but we can always unplug it. No. If it's smarter than you are, it will figure out a way to convince you that you've unplugged it when you haven't, or it will find a way to plug itself in that you're unaware of. Chimpanzee's not going to outsmart, Victor Davis Hanson. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't matter how much time the chimpanzee has. He's not going to be able to put together something that Victor Davis Hanson's going to fall for. So, there you go. And comment section, CP Tome says, "Who wants to live forever?" Think about this. In this, I don't know if it was in this, the Selfish Ledger movie, but I've heard it talked about before. They're saying because a computer intelligence is using electrons traveling very short distances, while biological intelligence is using electrochemicals over a wider distance, this distance. This is one of the reasons why computers are able to so-called quote-unquote think faster than us, because the actual mechanism that houses the consciousness is infinitely, well, not infinitely, but significantly faster. So in other words, one of the things they're saying is just think how great that would be if we could upload our consciousness into machines, into computers. We'd be able to think 1,000,000 times faster than we do now. And that is an indication of how far out in the woods these people are. You just think about that for a second. Think about that for a second. You could think 1,000,000 times faster than you think now. That means you could read virtually every book in existence in the length of the time it takes for me to finish this sentence. I don't, honest to God, know. I, honest to God, don't know what these people actually are thinking when they say things like that. I sometimes get bored standing in an elevator. But if I had to stand in an elevator, not for 1 minute, but for 3 million minutes? I'm sorry. Let's just find out. If I was in an elevator for 3 billion minutes, 60, it's 50,000 hours, 2,000 days, 5.7 years. So imagine that you are thinking a million times faster, and you go stand in an elevator, and in time it takes you to go down one floor, 1 minute, let's say, including the wait. Let's say that you had to stand in place without any break, awake all the time, fully conscious, and it would take you almost 6 years to ride that elevator down. Wow. Anyway, yeah, that's it. Yeah, I know I've been a little bit lackluster tonight, but I'm just a little bit tired, and we're not much longer to go. I've got one more script that I'm just wrapping up now, one more to do after that, and then we're done. And I can get back to putting my full attention into things like, firewalls and content for BillWhittle.com. I needed this job. That's all there is to it. And I'm very proud of it. And what I heard today, I'm very proud of it. So I can't wait to hear from you guys. It'll be one episode a week for the next 12 weeks, starting tomorrow. Links will be up there. And I will take care of all of that tomorrow morning. I was also sick, briefly sick. I was sick for a couple hours on Wednesday morning, which meant that we missed two Bill Whittle Now shoots. So hopefully this uploading the speech and also the having the podcast available will make up for that a little bit. Anyway, I think that'll do it. The cruise continues to grow, by the way, and that's going to be an absolute blast. We're not quite there yet, but we probably got about another 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks left to buy your ticket, and man, we're going to have some fun. There's some really great people on that tour already, plus Steve and Scott. So that'll do it. As always, thanks again to the members at BillWhittle.com who make the show possible, and all of our friends out there, and all of my Star citizens and the rest of the gang. Have some news on that front, but it's going to still be another couple weeks, I think, before I can start playing around with that. Anyway, that'll do it for this edition of the Stratosphere Lounge on the 30th of January 2020. I'm Bill Whittle. You guys be careful out there, and I will see you next time right here on the Stratosphere Lounge. Push the button.